Hello, today I'm going to be talking about the models of policing in England and Wales. More importantly, how has policing changed through the years? In the Anglo-Saxon period, which lasted between 400 AD and 1066, there were origins of a policing system in England and Wales. This system was designed for the citizens themselves to keep the peace by making sure that no law was ever broken, and if it was, the offender was caught, with a failure to do so resulting in a fine. The system required citizens to keep the peace, as at that time, state intervention was very limited. The most fundamental form of deterring crime was severe punishment. In 1285, the Statute of Winchester was established. This statute aimed to establish a system of law and order by enforcing a duty to citizens to be a parish constable for at least 1 year. The duties the citizens carried out were often unpleasant and unpopular, and the system was heavily reliant on hue and cry, which is a term used for loud public outcry. Citizens who completed their time as being a parish constable were often not paid, and on top of that were forced to continue with their original jobs whilst also being a parish constable. In 1983, Rock stated that at this time, for practical purposes, a large number of communities were self-policing because of the different cases of leniency occurred across the country. In the 1600s, a new method of policing was introduced called the night watchman. Men were paid to roam the streets day and night to spot any form of criminal activity and put a stop to it. The men used in this line of work were often underpaid, uneducated, which caused a lack of intelligence in the job, and of low social class. The men were often old and weak or unfit for any other form of work. The system of policing was commonly used in communities up until the 19th century. In 1748, Henry Fielding became Chief Magistrate at Bow Street Court. In the 18th century, the term police began to be used regularly with Rawlings noting that the idea of governance shifted from regulation of a city towards regulation of the inhabitants. To combat lawlessness in London, Henry Fielding created the Bow Street Runners, which saw a major reduction of highwaymen, thieves and robbers, and set the trend for a more active form of policing. Despite having such an impact on the capital's crime numbers, some people still asked for more. Rawlings' work in 1999 covered a speech to the Houses of Parliament in 1751 from George II asking for the Bow Street Runners to be more effective in their quest for stopping crime. As time went on, it was finally time for a new form of policing as law and order began to break down. As time went on, capitalism rose, increasing the amount of class conflict, particularly in poorer areas, this being known as revisionist. Simultaneously, urbanisation due to the Industrial Revolution introduced problems the previous system couldn't cope with, also known as orthodox. In opposition to the orthodox approach, insubordinates such as criminals and gangsters, and oppositions to the revisionists were the upper class as they feared paying taxes, as well as the working class as they were already under surveillance. In 1829, the new police and the Metropolitan Police Act was created. The new police was formed by the Home Secretary at the time, Robert Peel. Robert Peel provided a new police force across London and the capital's surrounding areas, with all new police forces to be under overall control of the Home Secretary and the HQ to be placed in Scotland Yard. Emsley notes that despite history on policing making a logical progression from the Bow Street Runners to the new police bore no resemblance to the Bow Street Runners. The new police were uniformed and possessed military characteristics. However, Miller states that crucially, in contrast to the American police forces that would appear in the 19th century, they were unarmed apart from carrying a small wooden truncheon in an attempt by Peel to counter public fears of a quasi-military. Along with the new police came Peel's 9 principles of policing. Principle 1. To prevent crime and disorder as an alternative to their repression by military force and severity of legal punishment. Principle number 2. To recognise always that the power of the police to fulfil their functions and duty is dependent on the public approval of their existence. Principle number 3. To recognise always that to secure and maintain the respect and approval of the public means also the securing of the willing cooperation of the public in the task securing observance of laws. Principle number 4. To recognise always that the extent to which the cooperation of the public can be secured diminishes proportionately the necessity of the use of physical force and compulsion for achieving police objectives. Principle number 5. To seek and preserve public favour, not by pandering to public opinion, but by constantly demonstrating absolutely impartial service to law. Principle number 6. To use physical force only when the exercise of persuasion, advice and warning is found to be insufficient to obtain public cooperation to an extent necessary to secure observance of law or to restore order. Principle number 7. To maintain at all times a relationship with the public that gives reality to the historic tradition that the police are the public and the public are the police. Principle number 8. To recognise always the need for strict adherence to police executive functions. Principle number 9. To recognise always that the test of police efficiency is the absence of crime and disorder. In the early 20th century, after the First World War, the police force numbers in Britain had been depleted, which caused the police to respond less due to lack of personnel available. This then caused reasonable unrest in communities. In an attempt to solve this problem, the Desborough Committee was created in 1919. In order to change the recruitment model for police officers, the committee recommended a substantial raise in payment to police officers, and this can arguably be the moment a shift away from being local police authority power and towards centralised power of the Home Office. In 2003, Emsley noted that although morale remained low, police and public relations began to grow strong again after positive views towards the police were enforced via films and radio shows, most notably being the film The Blue Lamp. The 1950s are known as the golden age of policing. This was caused by public having positive outlook on the police. The police were seen more as guardians rather than oppressors. Despite having major scandals in the police force, one notable case being in Brighton in 1956, where a chief constable and senior officers were charged with corruption. However, luckily, due to the lack of media presence, the stories never left the local Brighton area, allowing the police to maintain a positive public appearance. The 1970s damaged the image of the reputation of the police massively. This was caused by the corruption in the Met CID, as well as the drug squad scandals and obscene publication squad scandals. Factors such as society culture began to affect police and public affairs as the police struggled with internal racist and sexist issues. The political climate also affected the police's image due to civic unrest between trade unions and state, which impacted the working class, creating politicising of the police. Conservative governments then began streamlining public services, getting performance indicators for the police to achieve, the police then using questionable methods to achieve such requirements. The media also played its part in the police's reputation falling, as the media reporting had a further reach thanks to televisions in all homes. In an attempt to regain any form of reputation in 1972, Robert Mark was appointed Met Commissioner. Robert Mark was seen by many as an outsider and had a reputation for being Mr. Clean. Once introduced into his new role, he focused on Department A10, his uniformed senior officers, abolished the obscene publication squad, officer mobility, and the press. Due to Mark's new regime, 500 officers left the police force during his tenure, many believed to have left before being investigated for previous actions. In the 1980s, the police received fewer allegations of corruption, however received more allegations of abuse of police powers, with inner-city riots and industrial disputes taking place. Police officers began being called Maggie's boot boys, as it was seen as they were sent to carry out Margaret Thatcher's rulings and squash the lower classes. Today there are 43 forces in England and Wales, and while the police have evolved since its early beginnings, scandals still occur. In 2019, an example of this would be a police officer was jailed for downloading and watching pornography while investigating the death of a child. Over the course of this vlog, I hope to have covered the history of policing in England and Wales. Thank you for watching.